Hello and welcome to today's deck tech on Black-White Reanimator. Reanimator is, as you'd expect it, a deck in the black-white colors that makes use of existing pretty good reanimation spells and some good reanimation targets. For this deck tech, we'll just kind of go up the curve and explain it as it comes. Stitcher's Supplier is a good one-drop that, besides just being a one-drop that can apply pressure, also is a good way to fill your yard. I have 3 Mana Tithes in here. Since game 1, this can very easily win you games and give you a great surprise factor. However, the surprise factor is greatly diminished on games 2 and 3. So we often cut this out, usually. 4 copies of Mire Triton. Nice aggressive body that also mills and fills your graveyard, as well as gaining you some life and gives you an effective blocker. 4 copies of Skyclave Apparition as a sort of removal spell and a body. It helps to get rid of any relatively low cost permanents, and if you really have no other reanimation target in your bin, you could do worse than reanimate a Skyclave Apparition. I have 3 Baleful Mastery, since it's a pretty much hard removal for creatures and planeswalkers. We don't really mind paying the cheap cost and giving them a card, since odds are we're probably getting rid of a very important thing or a card that can, a creature or whatever that can really wreck our day. 3 copies of Blood for Bones is our second removal spell, or not removal, sorry, reanimator spell. The fact that it can come down to 4 mana is nice. We have also, with cards like Stitcher's Supplier and the Mire Triton and the occasional Castle Ardenvale little token and what have you. Nice way to use or to give fuel for the Blood for Bones. Also, effectively, netting you a card besides the one you reanimate is a nice little touch. 4 copies of Unburial Rites is a nice, just always reanimates a card, but can also be cheaper if you happen to mill over it. So really we have, in theory, 8 to 11 copies of reanimation effects. Now for our reanimation targets, I have 2 Angels of Invention as a way to pump our own board, make our board go wider, or have a little bit of lifelink in the main board. We have 2 Noxious Gearhulks as a way to destroy creatures, and when we do destroy creatures, we also gain some life, seeing how this is a more, I guess you would call it, grindy value style deck, so we value the life gain. 2 Elesh Norns as a way to, again, pump our board, but also impact or sometimes wipe our opponent's board. And Elesh Norn is not a miserable body on her own. We also have 2 Black Praetors, whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce, who, besides having Swamp Walk, which is a useful form of evasion, we also get on our upkeep a recurring sort of, what's it called, reanimation effect. So our 11 from earlier little reanimation effects goes up to 13 with Black Praetor. Also, at the beginning of our opponent's upkeep, their opponent has to sack a creature, which helps to, much like with Elesh Norn, to slowly chip away at our opponent's board. And we have 2 copies of Meteor Golem as a sort of fill-in-the-gaps kind of reanimator, since sometimes you don't want to just remove or destroy creatures. Sometimes you need some tricky problem permanents, or that your opponent has tricky problem permanents that you need to get rid of. Land-based, pretty simple. 4 Snarls, 4 Shock Lands, some swamps, some plains, and 1 of each castle. I would like to think the castles are pretty self-explanatory. Castle Locthwain for some card draw. Castle Ardenvale, not only for the defensive benefit or the flood protection that the Castle Ardenvale provides you, but also, as we talked about earlier, occasionally you want some tokens for Blood for Bones. Sideboard, relatively easy. Again, with this, pardon the weird layout, this is not supposed to be this confusing. We have a couple Relic of Progenitus against opposing graveyard decks, since we don't want to turn off our own graveyard decks. Running 3 Fractures as usually forms of artifact or enchantment hate, so your Rest in Peace or your Grafdigger's Cages. Of course, being able to target and get rid of the occasional really annoying planeswalkers like your Teferis and what have you is a nice little touch. Running 2 copies of Teferi's Protection, which can be a board wipe if you need it, but really it's something that we bring in when those like Sultai, like Omniscience take a million turns and you never finish the game. This is sort of a bubble for that sort of forces our opponent's combo decks to usually sort of spin their wheels and give us another turn. 2 copies of Lyra Dawnbringer, which is another reanimation target we can bring in against aggro decks if we feel our life total is going to be particularly pressured. Running a couple Wrath of Gods, since decks can go under you and sometimes you just need the safety and security of just a good Wrath of God where you don't have to worry about it. And since our deck is Reanimator, sometimes we even want to get our creatures in the yard to reanimate them again. I actually run, we'll say 2 Wandering Archaic, since that's usually what gets reanimated or played. Of course, if you happen to cast Explore the Vastlands because you really need some land and you need to find a reanimation spell, it's just a little bit of extra. But the Wandering Archaic is sort of our answer to the occasional like control deck that has a lot of counter spells or thought seizes or what have you. Wandering Archaic is a way to match that. And it's also, like any of our creatures in this deck, both in the sideboard or in the main board, we don't mind casting them if we have to. Our last reanimation target... do this. Nope. Come on. Last reanimation target. There we go. Running 2 Massacre Worms is a way to also, much like with the Wrath of God, something we bring in against opposing creature decks that are trying to go particularly wide, since Massacre Worm gives us a way to hopefully alleviate those problems. Also, the reach that it can give us when opposing creature dies is more relevant than one would think. And that is Black-White Reanimator. Thank you all for watching. Like the video if you liked it, sub if you like me, and if you have any sort of questions or comments, hey, that's what the comments are for. And if this video does particularly well or better than most, I will do a gameplay video if people want it. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye!